At its peak, one institution held more financial power over the United States than the federal government itself. It set interest rates, controlled credit from Boston to New Orleans, and quietly determined whether the American economy would grow or collapse. And then a single man, driven by something closer to personal vendetta than policy, dismantled it piece by piece and got away with it. To understand what was lost, you have to go back to a continent that was, financially speaking, a wreck. The American Revolution was not just a war of muskets and pamphlets. It was an extraordinarily expensive enterprise. The Continental Congress printed money so aggressively that the phrase "not worth a continental" became common slang for something utterly worthless. By the time independence was won, the new nation had almost no credible financial architecture at all. Alexander Hamilton looked at that chaos and saw a blueprint. His argument was audacious for the time. A national bank, partly privately owned, would give the government a stable place to park revenue, manage its debts, and extend credit to merchants and businesses. Congress chartered the first bank of the United States in 1791. It worked. Not perfectly, but it worked. Well enough that when its charter expired in 1811, the vote to renew it failed by a single vote in the Senate. The consequences were almost immediate. The War of 1812 arrived, and without a national bank to coordinate financing, the Treasury could barely pay its soldiers. The government was forced to rely on a patchwork of state banks with wildly inconsistent standards. Some sound, many not. By the end of the war, inflation had surged and the financial system was in near paralysis. Even those who had opposed the first bank began quietly reconsidering. In 1816, Congress chartered its successor. The Second Bank of the United States opened in Philadelphia and quickly became something genuinely powerful. At the height of its influence, it held roughly 20% of all deposits in the country and issued a currency that people actually trusted. It acted, in practice, as an early central bank, disciplining reckless state lenders, providing stable credit to the expanding frontier economy, and smoothing the kind of boom and bust cycles that had repeatedly devastated ordinary Americans. Its president, Nicholas Biddle, was brilliant, polished, and utterly convinced of its indispensability. Biddle ran the institution with genuine sophistication. When state banks extended too much credit and risked destabilizing regional economies, the second bank would tighten the reins, demanding they redeem their notes in hard currency. It was an early, rough version of monetary policy. The system was imperfect and sometimes brutal to debtors, particularly farmers on the western frontier who needed credit to survive. That tension between financial discipline and democratic access was always there, simmering just beneath the surface. Andrew Jackson arrived in Washington in 1829 carrying two convictions that would prove fatal to the bank. The first was philosophical. He believed concentrated financial power was inherently corrupt, that a semi-private institution with a federal charter was a monster in democratic clothing, giving wealthy shareholders leverage over the people's money. The second conviction was personal. Jackson had grown up poor on the Carolina frontier. He had seen debt-ruined men. He had watched banks foreclose on neighbors. His distrust was not academic. It was bone deep. Biddle made a catastrophic miscalculation. Advised by allies, including the Senator Henry Clay, he applied to renew the bank's charter 4 years early, in 1832, right in the middle of a presidential election year. The political logic was supposed to be airtight. If Jackson vetoed the recharter, he would look like an enemy of stability heading into the election. Clay would use it against him. What Biddle and Clay failed to understand was that Jackson did not view the veto as a liability. He viewed it as a weapon. Jackson's veto message, delivered in July 1832, was unlike anything the American political system had seen. It was not a dry constitutional argument. It was a declaration of war. The bank, Jackson wrote, was a monopoly that made the rich richer and the poor poorer. foreign shareholders, he emphasized pointedly, held significant stakes. It was an institution of privilege. The message was aimed not at Congress, but at voters, and it landed with enormous force. Jackson won re-election by a landslide. The recharter was dead, but Jackson was not finished. Killing the recharter meant the bank would wind down when its charter expired in 1836. That was too slow. Jackson wanted the federal government's deposits removed immediately, effectively strangling the bank's operations years ahead of schedule. His Treasury Secretary refused. Jackson fired him. The next Treasury Secretary also refused. Jackson fired him too. The third, Roger Taney, complied. Even within the executive branch, the destruction of the bank required something close to a purge. Biddle fought back the only way he knew how, by calling in loans and tightening credit aggressively, deliberately triggering a contraction that he hoped would be blamed on Jackson's recklessness. It worked, briefly. A recession hit. Businesses failed. Congressmen flooded Washington with petitions. A delegation of Philadelphia merchants came to the White House in desperation. Jackson told them, by most accounts, to go to Nicholas Biddle. He felt nothing close to remorse. The political pain of the contraction, he calculated, would not be enough to save the bank. He was right. The Bank of the United States died in 1836. What followed was not quite what either side had predicted. The federal deposits were redistributed to dozens of state banks, quickly dubbed pet banks by Jackson's critics, many of which lent recklessly against those new reserves. Land speculation exploded. Jackson, alarmed by the bubble he had partly created, issued the Specie Circular in 1836, requiring payment for government land in gold or silver. The liquidity evaporated almost overnight. In 1837, the American economy collapsed into one of the worst depressions of the 19th century. Hundreds of banks failed. Unemployment surged. The contraction lasted roughly 7 years. Historians still debate the precise causes. They were multiple, but the absence of any institution capable of acting as a lender of last resort, of steadying the system under pressure, was a structural wound. The country would not get a proper central bank again until the Federal Reserve was created in 1913. That is 77 years of financial improvisation. The story of the second bank is, at its core, a story about what happens when personal conviction overwhelms institutional judgment. Jackson was not entirely wrong. The bank was imperfect. It did serve wealthy interests. It was politically entangled. It lacked democratic accountability. But the alternative he left in its place was not a more democratic system. It was a vacuum. And vacuums in financial systems are never empty for long. They fill with panic. Nicholas Biddle retired to his estate outside Philadelphia. He died in 1844, facing civil suits related to the bank's final operations. Jackson lived until 1845, and by most accounts never expressed a single regret about the bank war. When asked near the end of his life what he considered his greatest accomplishment, he reportedly said he had killed the bank. Whether that is legend or fact, it captures something true about the man, and about how thoroughly one person's will can reshape an economy for generations.